Our government not only pays $3 billion a year, it provides political protection for Israel. It defends Israel in the United Nations. We hear a lot about how Israel is being singled out at the UN so much. The reality is the US veto in the Security Council ensures that almost none of the efforts to hold Israel accountable in the UN ever succeed. When on an occasion you get one mild resolution criticizing the UN, when you get one resolution criticizing Israel in the UN, you immediately see the United States ensuring that there is no implementation, that Israel is not in fact held accountable. So that kind of protection is worth almost more than the $3 billion a year, and the strong military alliance. The U.S. views itself very much as the military backer of Israel should it ever be threatened. So that relationship, of course, damages our self-interest here in the United States, because it means that people around the world see the United States behind whatever Israel does. And there's good reason for that. If a Palestinian in Gaza looks out the window, what does she see? She sees the bombing of a car, for instance, that Israel may claim is a targeted assassination, being carried out by a Boeing plane, an F-16, using a TOW missile made in the U.S., Boeing made in the U.S., the Apache helicopter gunships made in the U.S., the bullets made in the U.S., the communication system that allows the Israelis to carry out these targeted assassinations using cell phones to trigger explosions. That whole system is made by Motorola. This entire occupation is made in the US of A. So it's not surprising that when Palestinians see what Israel's doing, they blame the United States. People around the world see it the same way. It means that we in the United States have a particular obligation to be part of the global movement that now is in motion, when we've seen the inability of the United Nations to take its responsibility seriously, to implement its responsibility regarding the violations committed by Israel. There's a great deal of hypocrisy in U.S. foreign policy all over the world, but it's perhaps sharpest in the Middle East, where you have some of the most repressive dictatorships, absolute monarchies like Saudi Arabia or Jordan, military dictatorships disguised as democracies. You have a country like Egypt that claims to be a democracy, but it's actually a family-run business with the father now turning over power to his son. These are horrifying governments, and they are backed historically by the United States in the interest of stability. This was necessary to keep U.S. control of resources, namely oil. Israel fits right in there. Israel's repression is a little bit different. Inside Israel, Israel's very democratic. Socially and culturally, it's much more Western, it's much more European in style, but it imposes a draconian, brutal occupation on the Palestinians of the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. And, of course, inside Israel, there is legally mandated discrimination against non-Jews, meaning particularly the 20% of the population that is Palestinian. For the Palestinians, there's a sense that people want justice. They know they're not going to get absolute justice. History has winners and losers, and they have lost, and they will lose. But they want some modicum of justice. That means land. That means real independence, not being a subsidiary entity without a military, without a government, without independence, where Israel continues to control the borders, the airspace, the underground, the water sources. Israel controls all of that. They want an end to that. Some want it in the context of one state, some in two states. Some don't really care if they just had the right to live as independent, equal human beings, whether it's in one state or two states. But I sometimes think that a useful way to look at it is, because we hear so often that what has to happen is the end of violence. We need to end the violence. And certainly violence is always bad. It's always damaging to people. We need to end the violence. But let's look at what would happen if the violence stopped today. If the violence stopped today, no one is shooting, no one's being killed, what would life look like in Israel versus in Palestine? In Israel, life would be great. ties with the whole world, easy transit to Europe, the rest of the world, great trade relations with everyone, a wealthy country, a powerful country, big military, nobody has to be fighting anywhere, nobody's shooting, everybody's happy. Life is great. All we want, all we need is an end to violence. Now let's look at the Palestinian side. There's no violence today. Nobody's being killed. But what is our life? A wall divides our communities from each other, from the cities where they would ordinarily have access to schools, hospitals, etc. There are Israeli checkpoints still dividing our town. Nobody's being shot, but we're still under control. We don't control our own borders. We don't control our airspace. We don't have any control of our own water. So stopping the violence is not an equal opportunity advantage for both sides. And that's a very powerful reality that I'm afraid most people in the United States don't see when our news coverage is limited to simply the fighting that is an occasional outbreak. We are in the United States. We're Americans. We're residents of the United States. We have the obligation to look at our government's complicity with this. It's enabling of this terrible reality. And that's what we have to target our campaigns around. It's campaigns of education, campaigns of mobilization, tax resistance. The fact that $3 billion a year is going to support this already arms-bloated, wealthy country